Good morning everyone. Welcome to the day 2nd of the online workshop on English communication skills organized by the Department of Lifelong Learning and Extension, Sant Gadge Baba Amravati University, Amravati, in collaboration with Professor Ram Meghe College of Engineering and Management, Badnera, and Loknayak Bapuji Ane Mahila Mahavidyalay, Yavatmal. My name is Jitendra Barulkar. I am an assistant professor in the Department of English, Adarsh Mahavidyalay, Dhamangaon Railway. And in today's session, I am going to deal with the topic of listening skills in language acquisition. For the convenience of understanding, I have divided my presentation into 3 sections. In section 1, I'll deal with listening as a skill. In the next section, I'll deal with the importance of listening in language acquisition. And finally, I'll talk about strategies and tips to improve communication in English. So getting started. Let's first talk about the 4 basic skills of language. LSRW is the set of 4 skills of language learning. It is the set of 4 capabilities that allow an individual to comprehend and produce spoken language for proper and effective interpersonal communication. These skills are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. In the context of first language acquisition, the 4 skills are most often acquired in the order of listening first, then speaking, then possibly reading, and finally writing. Why are these skills required or necessary for students? In English, it is the most dominant business language in the world. It has become almost a necessity for people to speak English if they are to enter a global workforce or higher education. So now the point is, what is listening? Listening is the process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and responding to spoken and or non-verbal messages. To hear something with thoughtful attention. Effective communication is always a two-way communication. It depends not just on speaking, but it equally depends on listening. When we speak about listening, the question comes in our mind, what is the difference between listening and hearing? Let us have a look. Hearing. It is simply the physical process. It is natural and a passive activity in which the sound, the noises, the voices, they happen to fall on our ear. We involuntarily happen to hear them. Whereas listening is physical and mental process. It is an active process. It is a learned process, and listening is one of the 4 basic skills of language. Compared to hearing, listening is hard. For example, let's talk about breathing. We unconsciously keep on breathing. The day we were born, we are breathing. We don't pay attention to our breathing process. In the same manner, it is with hearing. In hearing, we rarely pay any attention. Whatever comes, we receive it. But listening is a conscious process. You must choose to participate in the process of listening. Like nowadays we are talking about pranayama or conscious breathing. So involuntary or unconscious breathing is fine. Okay, it will happen automatically. But if you really want to get benefit out of it, you will have to concentrate on it. You have to pay attention to it. And this is what is applicable to listening and hearing. So, if you want to listen to something or if you want to develop your listening skills, you must choose to participate in the process of learning. So let's first think about how much information do we get every day from listening. Your boss, your teacher, your colleagues, your clients, and your suppliers may communicate with you often. So will your family and friends. How much of the time you pay attention to? How much are you actually remembering from these conversations? Chances are it's a lot less than you think. A lot of times we act as if we are listening to the other person, but the reality is that our minds are racing to other topics or already planning what we are going to say in return. This means that we can miss important things that the person is saying. Some scientific studies and researches have shown that 75% of the time we are distracted or preoccupied or forgetful. 20% of the times we remember what we hear. More than 35% of businesses think that listening is a top skill for success. And it's a bitter fact that less than 2% of the people have had formal education with listening. Let's have a look at this chart, which describes, as in our earlier slide, we have seen that in language acquisition, that is first language, in mother tongue, in acquiring mother tongue, the sequence followed is LSRW. That is, we first listen, then we learn to speak, then we learn to read, and finally we learn to write. This is what is the order of a first language. Now, the extent of use, if you have a look at the extent of these skills we use, listening. The time an individual is engaged in communication, approximately 9% is devoted to writing, 16% is to reading, 30% to speaking, and whopping 45% to listening. Even some researchers, and they claim that the process of listening happens 60% of the time in our communication. But look at the last column of the chart. Therein lies the problem. The order that we learned our first language in the second column, which is the first we learned listening, then we learned speaking, then we learned reading, and then we learned writing. But in our education system or in our schooling or in second language acquisition, the order taught to us is the writing skills are taught to us first. We keep on writing the alphabets of the language, then we learn how to read them, then we start speaking, and finally, if someone wishes to teach us, they will teach us listening. In most of the cases, listening is not taught to us at all. Now coming to the point of process. What actually happens in the process of listening? In listening, there are 5 stages. Stage number 1 is of receiving. It is the intentional focus on hearing a speaker's message. So what involves in listening? First step is receiving. When we intentionally focus on hearing a speaker's message, we concentrate on what the person is saying. That is what we are trying to get something from him. He is speaking and we are trying to get. We are trying to receive the signals, and this is the first stage. This stage is represented by the ear because it is the primary tool involved with this stage of the listening process. Now comes the second stage, that is the stage of understanding. In the understanding stage, we attempt to learn the meaning of the message, which is not always easy. In this process, the processing is going on. This has started, the processing. We're trying to get what the person has said, deciding what the message means to you. It determines, in understanding, we determine what the person has said. We try to get meaning out of those words and messages. The next stage is remembering. And remembering begins with listening. If you can't remember something that was said, you might not have been listening carefully. Let's say it's a lecture of 40-45 minutes and you're constantly listening to someone. So you must also remember what the person has already said a few minutes ago. So remembering is again an important process while listening. However, even when you are listening attentively, some messages are more difficult than others to understand and remember. Highly complex messages that are filled with detail, they call for highly developed listening skills. So this is at the second stage, rather the third stage, which is of remembering. Now comes the next stage, that is of evaluation. The fourth stage in the listening process is evaluating. Evaluations of the same message can vary widely from one listener to another. As you could see in this picture, stages 2, 3 and 4 are represented by the brain because it is the primary tool involved with these stages of listening process. So remember where we started? We started with our ears, receptive skill. We started receiving messages. Then with our brain, we try to analyze it, understand it. Then we keep on remembering what the person is saying. And finally, we reach to the stage where we evaluate the message. And after evaluating, we understand what the speaker has said. The final stage of the process of listening is responding, sometimes referred to as feedback. It is the fifth and the final stage of listening process. Your reaction to the message, it can be emotional or intellectual. For example, you are giving positive feedback to your instructor if at the end of the class you stay behind to finish a sentence in your notes and approach the instructor to ask for clarification. Like we do in the class. If a teacher is delivering a lecture, he would finish it, and the attentive listener, when he goes through all the 4 stages, he receives our message, he understands, remembers, evaluates, and finally if he has any queries, questions and doubts in his mind, he will stay and he will approach us for some clarification on the topics taught. Or even in a presentation, in a seminar, in a conference, even we can approach the speaker for clarification, or even simply we can say, approach him and say that it was a fabulous presentation, giving positive feedbacks. This is what we call as responding, and this is the final stage of the process of listening. This stage is represented by lips because we have given feedback in the form of verbal feedback. However, you can just easily respond non-verbally, simply by nodding at the person or putting a pleasant smile on your face. So I hope you're getting the point. So this is all about the process of listening. Now we'll move ahead to the basic types of listening. Broadly, there are 4 types of listening. There is active listening, selective listening, empathetic listening, and ignoring listening. Let's now talk about active listening, which is the most important type of listening in our life. Active listening is when you make a conscious effort to hear and understand people so that you get the complete message. There are several things you can do to become an active listener. First, you need to pay attention. You try to understand all the things. You pay proper attention to the speaker. We know this is a bit obvious, but it is the most important part of active listening. For instance, make eye contact with the person talking to you. Ignore the outside factors like other conversations so that you can focus solely on the person who is talking to you. Most importantly, put your own thoughts on hold. Resist the urge to start planning your responses. Just listen carefully using your body language. Look at the person. Have a look at these two beautiful pictures, and an innocent child who's looking curiously and actively to the instructions of his mother. And the other picture would give you an idea how you are supposed to respond, how you are supposed to show your interested and involvement in the process of listening. Active listening ends with proper feedback. When you listen something, never ever forget to provide the speaker with proper feedback. The second type that comes into the list is selective listening. As the title goes, it is pretty selective. It means we are not much interested in the topic being discussed. We just look for some hints and some major points, like picking up from the whole stuff. We remember only selective portion of the speech, not the entire speech is remembered. Because most of the times the topic is not of our liking. We are a bit judgmental whether to take it, or do I know this, or I know enough of it. You keep attention, you pay attention only if you get something you don't know, or something which appeals you and interests you. The next type of listening is empathetic listening. I personally believe that the world at the moment, in the time of this digital revolution, is more in need of this type of listening. क्योंकि आज हमारे पास फ्रेंड्स तो बहुत हैं, फेसबुक है, ट्विटर है, व्हाट्सएप है, बट हमें सुनने वाला कोई नहीं है. हम आदी हो चुके हैं टेक्सटिंग के, लाइक्स, डिसलाइक्स, शेयर्स, पोस्ट्स एंड ऑल, बट रियल emotional person who can listen to you quietly. This is what empathetic listening is all about. When we listen empathetically, we go beyond sympathy to seek a truer understanding how the other person is feeling. It means putting yourself in someone else's shoe, understanding the situation from his or her point of view. As the code goes, we should speak in such a way that others would love to listen to you. No doubt, polish your speaking and speak so positively, enthusiastically that people would love to listen to you. But while listening, listen in such a way that others would love to speak to you. You're so polite, you're so full of empathy for them. They feel like, okay, there is no one else I could or I should approach. I must approach this man. If anyone else is in the world who can understand me, who can listen to me, it is you. So, listen in that way. Develop empathetic listening. This requires excellent discrimination and close attention to the nuances of emotional signals. When we are being truly empathetic, we actually feel what they are feeling. जैसे वो कहावत जाती है कि खामोश रहकर बहुत कुछ कहा है. खामोश रहकर बहुत कुछ कहा है, तारीफ तब हो अगर तुम सुन पाओ. Not necessarily that person will speak out his emotions. Empathetic listening involves listening beyond words. शब्दों से परे जाकर उन भावनाओं को समझना, यह है empathetic listening, जिसकी मुझे लगता है कि आज बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है. The last type of listening is ignoring listening, which I guess most of the students do it in the classrooms or to the suggestions that their parents give. It is not listening at all. It's pretty insulting to others, and it can add, or it would lead to stress, anxiety in your life, and it may also lead to some strained relations. So be careful. Never follow this type. Be an active listener. Follow empathetic listening. Be careful to avoid ignoring listening. With this, we have reached the end of the section 1, in which we have talked about what is listening and how important it is. In our coming sections, in my next session, I will be talking about the importance of listening in language acquisition, and finally, I'll deal with the strategies. Thank you so much for listening.